This is Tom Duty, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Duty in a Google search from my site, from the New York Times. A single migration from Africa populated the world, studies find. Modern humans evolved in Africa roughly 200,000 years ago. But how did our species go on to populate the rest of the globe? The question, one of the biggest in studies of human evolution, has intrigued scientists for decades. In a series of extraordinary genetic analysis published on Wednesday, researchers believe they have found an answer. This is a Wednesday in August of 2016. In the journal, that was a reader's note, Tom Duty's reader's note. I returned to the Times text. In the journal Nature, 3 separate teams of geneticists surveyed DNA collected from cultures around the globe. Many for the first time included that all non-Africans today trace their ancestry to a single population emerging from Africa between 50 and 80,000 years ago. I think all 3 studies are basically saying the same thing, said Joshua M. Aki, the University of Washington, who wrote a commentary accompanying the work. We know there were multiple dispersals out of Africa. We can trace our ancestry back to a single one. 3 teams sequenced the genomes of 787 people, obtaining highly detailed scans of each. The genomes were drawn from people in hundreds of indigenous populations. Basques, African Pygmies, Mayans, Bedouins, Sherpas, Cree Indians, to name just a few. The DNA of indigenous populations is essential to understanding human history. Many geneticists believe, yet until now, scientists have sequenced entire genomes from very few people outside the population centers like Europe and China. The new data already altering scientific understanding of what human DNA looks like. Experts said adding rich variations to our map, the genomes. Each team of registered researchers tackled different questions about our origins, such as how people spread across Africa and how other populated Australia. But all aimed to settle the controversial question of human expansion from Africa. In the 1980s, a group of paleontologists and geneticists began championing a hypothesis that modern humans emerged only once from Africa, roughly 50,000 years ago. Skeletons and tools discovered at archaeological sites clearly indicate that modern humans lived after the time in Europe, Asia, and Australia. Early studies of bits of DNA also supported this idea. All non-Africans are generally related to one another, geneticists found, and they all branch from a family tree rooted in Africa. Yet there are also clues that at least some modern humans may have departed Africa well before 50,000 years ago. perhaps part of an early wave of migration. In Israel, for example, researchers found a few distinctly modern human skeletons that are between 120 and 90,000 years old. In Saudi Arabia and India, sophisticated tools date back to 100,000 years. Last October, Chinese scientists reported finding teeth belonging to Homo sapiens that are at least 80,000 years old, perhaps as old as 120,000 years. In 2011, S.K. Willerslev, a renowned geneticist at the University of Copenhagen, and his colleagues came across some puzzling clues to the expansion out of Africa by sequencing the genome in Aboriginal Australia for the first time. Dr. Willerslev and his colleagues reconstructed the genome from a century-old lock of hair kept in a museum. The DNA held a number of particular variants found in Europeans or Asians, raising knotty questions about the origins of the people who first came to Australia and when they arrived. Intrigued, Dr. Willerslev decided to contact living Aboriginals to see if they would participate in a new genetic study. He joined David W. Lambert, a geneticist at Griffin University in Australia, who is already meeting with Aboriginal communities about participating in this kind of research. In collaboration with scientists at the University of Oxford, and researchers also obtained DNA from people in Papua New Guinea. All told, the team was able to sequence 83 genomes from Aboriginal Australians and 25 from Papua New Guinea, all with far greater accuracy than in Dr. Willerslev's 2011 study. Meanwhile, Mate Metspalu of Estonian Biocenter was leading a team of 98 scientists on another genome gathering project. They picked out 148 populations to sample mostly in Europe and Asia, with a few genomes from Africa and Australia. They too sequenced 483 genomes at high resolution. David Reich, a geneticist at Harvard Medical School, and his colleagues assembled a third database of genomes from the 6 inhabited continents. The Simons Genome Diversity Project, sponsored by the Simons Foundation and the National Science Foundation, contains 300 high-quality genomes from 142 populations. Examining the data separately, all three groups came to the same conclusion. People everywhere descended from a single migration of early humans from Africa. The estimates from the studies point to an exodus somewhere between 80,000 and 50,000 years. Despite earlier research, the teams led by Dr. Willerslev and Dr. Wright found no genetic evidence that there was an early migration giving rise to people in Australia and Papua New Guinea. The vast majority of their ancestry, if not all of it, is coming from the same out-of-Africa wave as Europeans and Asians, said Dr. Willerslev. But on that question, Dr.